The Far Quest, The Chronicles of Cursoon, Book 1, by R. Jason Lynch, copyright 2016, EMP 2023, all rights reserved. Chapter 19, A Lesson Applied. Like before, Cursoon found it virtually impossible to walk a direct path through Myrmurk, and rather than being helpful, Tipplglee followed the bard and only grumbled as they weaved their way around the reeking pools of black water and wads of prickly briars.
Hammers and pegs!
What's the matter now?
Cursoon sighed and turned to look at the little man.
We're going in circles!
Tipplglee complained.
And how could you know that?
Cursoon asked, and then added with a grimace.
Every part of this foul forest looks and feels the same.
He did not want to believe they were going in circles, but inwardly he knew it was most likely true. Tipplglee answered with a scolding expression.
Over an hour ago, I tapped my pipe out on a stump, and here's the very same ashes.
Exasperated, Cursoon slumped down upon a fallen tree, took off his colorful hat, and wiped his brow. The bog's air had become stiflingly humid, so that the bard's sweat made his clothes cling to his body. Tipplglee, on the other hand, didn't seem to be bothered by the heat in the least.
I was hoping I'd come out near the farm of Guileless again.
Cursoon groaned.
What in Riven should we do now? I could cut a path as I did before, but I'd still be choosing a random direction, and who knows where that would take us. What we really need is a clue to show us which way to go.
The little old man sat down upon a black stone and lit his pipe again. Taking several long puffs, he offered no contribution to the bard's deliberations. As he smoked, Tipplglee's pipe gave off a sweet aroma, and as its fragrance mixed with the foul reek of the swamp, a distant memory flooded into Cursoon's mind.
The smell of your pipe reminds me of my childhood tutor,
Cursoon commented thoughtfully.
I'm sure I told you about Tizan all those many years ago.
No, but I'm sure you will now.
Tipplglee grumbled, leaned back against the dead tree that butted up against the stone he sat upon, and closed his magnified eyes. The bard ignored the little man's comment and continued speaking his thoughts aloud.
He was a green wizard, and he came to my father's castle when I was almost 7 years old. After he made a display of his power in our great hall, I was enamored with the idea of becoming a wizard. Oh, how I begged my father to let me be Tizane's apprentice.
'Tis a bard, I thought you were.
Tipplglee grumbled without opening his eyes.
Yes, but that came years later.
Cursoon replied and then went back to his story.
I begged, and when Tizane offered to teach me for nothing more than room and board, my father gladly agreed, thinking he had made a fine bargain. In truth, I believe that half-starved old wizard just hoped for a place at my father's bountiful table. At any rate, that's how I began my training to be a wizard, and many were the hours that I sat studying Tizane's dusty old book while he dozed with his smoking pipe clenched between his stained teeth. As I turned the yellowed pages of his book, it gave off the same foul-smelling stench as this vile swamp. But only just now did I realize the similarity of their odors as I smelled the aroma of your pipe mixing with the reek of this place. In fact, I'm starting to wonder if that old wizard didn't accidentally drop his book somewhere in this bog while on his way to my father's castle.
Cursoon paused, chuckled to himself, and then continued his reminiscing.
I can still remember almost every detail of that dusty old tome. It was bound in black leather with 7 precious stones set in its cover. Each stone was etched with a different animal, and the leather around the stones was gilded. I can still hear old Tizane explaining what each of those silly symbols meant in his slow, methodical way of speaking.
The bard changed his voice to mimic the aged wizard.
You'll observe the 7 sigils upon my book. Understand that each of these represents one of the 7 disciplines of wizardry. The white stone in the center with a black tree etched upon it is the sigil for those wizards who study the element of ether and the ethereal realm. We call them Lich Heralds. The other 6 stones that are gathered around the first are as follows. At the bottom you see a yellow stone etched with a black boar. This is the sigil of those wizards who study metals, rocks, and earth. We call them earth forgers. You can see that the next stone to the right is red and has a black chimera etched upon it. That is the sigil of those wizards who study the flesh of all living creatures. We call them flesh benders. Next up, you can see an orange stone with a black dragon etched upon it. That is the sigil for those wizards who study fire and lightning. We call them fire wielders. At the top, you see a blue stone with a black raven etched upon it. That is the sigil of those wizards that study the air and wind. We call them stormbringers. Next, you see a purple stone etched with a black kraken. This is the sigil of those wizards who study water and waves. They've also gained great insights into the resonance of sound and the properties of light. Lastly, we come to the green stone with a black scorpion etched upon it. This is the sigil for my order. We are those who study plants, venoms, and their healing and hurting properties. The other wizards call us brew mixers. It may seem like a silly name, but we're the ones they call when a fever comes or a serpent bites or a scorpion stings.
Tippleglee interrupted with a hint of sarcasm in his voice.
Small wonder you didn't become a wizard. Even now, I'd rather spend all my time annoying others with my voice than listening to someone else ramble on and on forever.
Kirasoon raised one eyebrow while a smirk grew upon his face. He was sure this was meant as an insult, but instead of replying, he went on with what he was saying.
After he had explained the cover of his book, the old wizard asked if I had any questions. I did, but I was too ashamed to ask. After all, I was only 7. Tizan smiled at me with grandfatherly kindness.
Go on and ask. I see them on your face.
That time I only had 3.
Kirasoon counted them out on his fingers.
1. What is a chimera? 2. What is a kraken? And 3. Why are lich heralds in the center of all the other wizards? You'd think I'd given him a birthday present. He was so excited that he showered me with praise.
Oh, I say, those are wonderful questions. I do love a good question.
I'm sure he did if he's anything like you.
Tippleglee grumbled.
Questions gave him more to talk about.
Again, Kirasoon ignored the slight.
Tizane always said,
Remember, questions are how we learn, and the only foolish question is the one that goes unasked.
He answered mine in order.
1. The chimera was the first beast that the flesh benders successfully created, and that's why they use him as their sigil. As you can see on the red stone, he had the head and body of a lion, the horns of a goat, and his tail was a venomous serpent. 2. A kraken is a giant cephalopod.
A what? I'd never heard of that either.
And 3. The sigil of the white wizards is in the middle because they study ether, and ether is the power behind all magic.
From that day on, I spent uncounted hours studying Tizan's book, for it was full of all sorts of lore. But before I could read it, I had to learn the secret tongue of magic, because every word of his book was written in that strange backwards language. Oh, how he used to lecture about the art of speaking and understanding the runic tongue.
Again, the bard made his voice sound old and frail.
The wizard's tongue is a fluid language, which is ever evolving. Therefore, you must have a firm grasp upon its complex grammatical rules. First of all, there are certain parts of each word that never change. These unmoving affixes are like signposts, if you will, that help one navigate the intended meaning of the speaker. When reading runic, always look for the constancy. Those will help you see the direction of speech.
With a thoughtful look, Kirasoon paused for a long moment, and then he echoed the words he just said, but in a new way.
Signposts help one navigate. Looking for the constancy will help you see the direction.
As he repeated these words, he absent-mindedly glanced over at a black, stagnant stream that lay nearby. However, as soon as his gaze lingered upon the still water, his blue eyes grew large with realization.
Look!
The bard almost shouted.
Here's a stream.
And there's a tree!
Tippleglee growled irritably.
There's no need to yell about it.
No, I mean to say, what if we follow it?
Kirasoon continued undeterred. The black stream was more like a long, stagnant pool, and it was slightly more than ankle deep. The only ripples that disturbed it were made by whatever vile thing lurked beneath its glass-like surface.
It's a steady source of bearing for us. We need only pick from 2 directions instead of every way, and sooner or later, it has to lead us out of this vile swamp.
The bard explained and then added with a shrug.
Besides, we can't get any more lost than we already are.
Tippleglee tapped out his pipe and put it away in his bag.
Anything would be better than sitting here listening to you prattle on.
Kirasoon sighed with a note of discouragement, and when the grumpy old man heard it, he knew he had made one too many harsh comments. With a stiff nod, Tippleglee shouldered his pack and added gruffly,
Besides, it's as good a plan as any.
In response, a small smile lit Kirasoon's face. But before he could say anything about it, Tippleglee turned toward the stream. With a chuckle and a shake of his head, Kirasoon followed close behind.
If memory serves, a river enters the bog at the northwest end, and so, the farm of Guileless should be upstream.
The bard reasoned aloud as he stepped up beside the little old man. Gazing skeptically at the stream, Tippleglee grumbled,
But which way's upstream? It doesn't move enough to give us that clue.
Kirasoon frowned.
I suppose our only course is to gamble. I know. I'll let you choose.
He added with a sly grin.
Oh, no, you don't.
The little man growled.
I shan't pick so you can blame me later.
The bard rolled his eyes.
Very well, I'll choose and bear the blame.
He paused, thought for a moment, and then commented,
It's always best to go the right way.
Shrugging his thin shoulders, Tippleglee grumbled,
With as little as we have to go on, it makes more sense than none.
So with that, the 2 men turned to their right and followed the small, stagnant stream.